Indiana's quiet roads can look like any other Midwestern stretch. Cornfields folding into dusk, a two-lane road that seems to end at a span of trees, a porch light that blinks off at midnight. But in the state's remotest pockets, where towns thin and the past is closer than the present, neighbors will tell you the world feels different after dark. They'll lower their voices. They'll describe a smell that shouldn't be there, a ribbon of smoke from a fire long out, a single floral scent in an empty room. They'll tell you about footsteps on attics that have no inhabitants, or about the way the air drops cold and heavy as if someone has walked through. Tonight, we go to those places, 12 encounters, 12 witnesses who left with more questions than answers. Each story below is drawn from testimony collected from guests, staff, local historians, and independent investigators. People who visited, stayed, or worked in these remote Indiana sites and carried back something they could not explain. What repeats across them is not a photographic proof or a final verdict, but a pattern. Places with weighty histories retain a kind of memory. People feel, hear, and sometimes see traces of that memory. We'll listen to those traces. If this kind of deep dive into haunted places intrigues you, like and subscribe. There's more to uncover as we move deeper into these shadows. 1. The Story Inn, Nashville, Brown County. History anchor. Once a stagecoach stop and then an inn for travelers through the rolling hills, the old property carries layers of stories, fires, renovations, and generations of owners who ran a small house of hospitality in isolation. Encounter vignette. A late-night guest wakes to a pale light pooling at the foot of the bed. It's not the highway glare. It is a soft blue wash that hovers in the doorway, then resolves into the shape of a woman in period dress. She does not approach. The guest feels a cool draft near the shoulder as if someone has brushed past, and a whisper presses against the ear. No words, only breath. Evidence note. Multiple guests over the years have reported similar blue glows and sudden temperature drops. An independent investigator captured a faint, low-frequency audio on a recorder during an overnight stay. An indistinct, human-sounding exhale layered under the ambient noise, but nothing conclusive. Photographs sometimes show unexplained lens flares and orbs near the entryway. Local reaction warning. Staff accept the stories as part of the inn's character. They caution visitors to respect the building and its history. Many patrons treat the reports as a chill added to the atmosphere. A few prefer a different room. But the next place we visit keeps its memories in colder, quieter stacks. 2. Willard Library, Evansville. History anchor. A 19th century library whose collection and architecture have served Evansville generations. The building's long hours and empty aisles after closing have produced decades of librarian lore. Encounter vignette. A night janitor, working late, says she rounds a corner between the biography and poetry stacks and sees a gray figure at the end of the aisle. Faintly luminous, almost translucent, standing still between the shelves. When she blinks, it's gone, but an old metal cart that had been stacked neatly is now tipped over, books fanned across the floor as if someone had taken a single step and brushed through. Evidence note. Librarians have reported recorded EVPs captured on smartphones, soft whispers indistinguishable in content but undeniable in presence, and a recurring cold spot on the mezzanine landing, measurable when temperature sensors were used by curious staff. Photographs occasionally catch a hazy form in the stacks, but the images are grainy and ambiguous. Local reaction/warning. The library maintains its hours and its archives, but staff gently advise visitors not to wander after dark without a guide. If you think empty corridors are quiet, the next site shows how silence can be heavier than any sound. 3. Levi Coffin House, Fountain City. Local lore. History anchor. Known in local history as a waypoint on the Underground Railroad, this house stands as a symbol of aid and escape. It is a place of solemn memory where the stories of the enslaved and those who helped them are preserved and retold. Encounter vignette. A volunteer guide leading a small evening group pauses in the basement where secret spaces once sheltered travelers. Someone in the group feels a pressure against the shoulder, an impression of being steered toward the hidden stair. A visitor later says, "I smelled smoke, but there was no fire. It smelled like old kitchens, like time." The guide watches a lantern swing when there is no breeze. Evidence note. Researchers have recorded instances of temperature anomalies in the basement and have captured a few brief, low-level audio fragments that sit beneath ambient noise, sighs, perhaps, or the faint echo of a voice, but no clear attributable phrases. Photographs of the back stair sometimes show unexpected blurs at the edge of frames. Local reaction/warning. Because the home is both museum and memorial, caretakers emphasize reverence. This is not a place to thrill-seek. Visitors are reminded to treat the house with solemn respect. And beyond the house, into fields and old crossroads, the land keeps its own stories. 4. West Baden Springs Hotel, West Baden Springs. History anchor. Built during an era of extravagant resort architecture and later altered by fires and financial collapse, the hotel's grand dome and empty corridors have witnessed opulence and struggle. Encounter vignette. An overnight guest, seated with a late-night drink in a shuttered bar, watches the dim reflection of the dome in the window. In the reflection, a figure crosses the lobby. Tall, hat-tilted, though the lobby itself is empty. Later, bells in the hallway ring as if from a call system long defunct. The guest feels a weight of presence in the room, like someone leaning into the armchair across the table. Then nothing. Evidence note. Security footage has recorded movement in closed service corridors where no staff were assigned overnight. Investigators have reported batteries in cameras draining faster than expected during certain sweeps, and a few EVP sessions captured faint, indistinct phrases that could be interpreted as names or dates, never clear enough to verify. Local reaction/warning. Hotel staff, many descendants of workers who maintained the place through lean decades, are used to oddities. They advise guests not to investigate restricted corridors and to let housekeeping handle anything that seems amiss. The luxury turns eerie under night's thin light, and the next site makes solitude feel far older than architecture. 5. French Lick Springs Hotel, French Lick. History anchor. Another resort town with a history of visitors seeking health and leisure, this hotel rose around mineral springs thought to have curative properties. In quieter wings, the laughter of former patrons seems to linger. Encounter vignette. A maintenance worker reports walking a long corridor and hearing rhythmic, measured footsteps behind him. 2 slow steps, 2 slow steps. Though when he turns, there is no one there. In a guest room, a parent awakes to the sense of a small child sitting at the end of the bed, playing with the fringe of a blanket. When she flips the light, the room is empty. The blanket is slightly moved. Evidence note. Investigators note that electronic devices sometimes flicker unpredictably in certain rooms. An infrared camera once recorded a moving shadow in a stairwell that did not cast a corresponding thermal signature. Several guests have sent in photographs showing small circular light artifacts in the corner of a frame. Local reaction/warning. The hotel treats these occurrences as part of its lore, an extra layer to the history tours. Employees encourage guests to report anything unusual rather than to explore unsupervised. While the resort's pasts are tied to health and pleasure, the land itself hides quieter episodes. 6. Culbertson Mansion, New Albany. History anchor. The mansion stands as an ornate Victorian testament to a bygone era, a place of social gatherings, domestic staff, and private tragedies recorded quietly in census rolls and letters preserved in archives. Encounter vignette. A docent describes giving a candlelit tour when a portrait in the drawing room seems to follow the group with its bays. Later, an assistant cleaning the upstairs nursery says she felt the tug of a small hand at her sleeve and found a faded toy placed carefully at the foot of the bed, an object she did not leave. Evidence note. Investigators note that electronic devices sometimes flicker unpredictably in certain rooms. An infrared camera once recorded a moving shadow in a stairwell that did not cast a corresponding thermal signature. Several guests have sent in photographs showing small circular light artifacts in the corner of a frame. Local reaction/warning. The hotel treats these occurrences as part of its lore, an extra layer to the history tours. Employees encourage guests to report anything unusual rather than to explore unsupervised. While the resort's pasts are tied to health and pleasure, the land itself hides quieter episodes. 6. Culbertson Mansion, New Albany. History anchor. The mansion stands as an ornate Victorian testament to a bygone era, a place of social gatherings, domestic staff, and private tragedies recorded quietly in census rolls and letters preserved in archives. Encounter vignette. A docent describes giving a candlelit tour when a portrait in the drawing room seems to follow the group with its gaze. Later, an assistant cleaning the upstairs nursery says she felt the tug of a small hand at her sleeve and found a faded toy placed carefully at the foot of the bed, an object she did not leave. Evidence note. Nighttime surveillance for security once captured a faint reflection moving in a pane of glass where no one was present. An investigative team recorded a short, high-pitched humming that correlated with no known mechanical source in the building during that hour. Several staff members report recurring headaches after long shifts, often concentrated after evenings alone in certain rooms. Local reaction warning. The mansion remains open for tours and events, but staff ask that anyone attending after dark remain with their group and respect restricted areas. Some workers opt out of late shifts. And as the road narrows and the map shows fewer dots, the next stop brings us to a place where medicine and memory collide. 7. Old County Hospital Annex, remote county seat. Name withheld. History anchor. Small county hospitals and annexes held generations of patients with illnesses and injuries long before modern facilities existed. Many of these rural wards were reshaped by changing practices and occasional closures. Encounter vignette. A night nurse working a swing shift walks a dim hallway checking empty rooms. Ahead, a bed that has been stripped for long waits is suddenly made. Blanket smoothed, pillow plumped, as if prepared for a patient. She hears a soft humming near an oxygen port. No equipment is attached there. When she reaches the door, a clinical cold settles over her skin, and she feels a light pressure on her ankle, as if someone has touched her to steady themselves. Evidence note. Occasional audio investigators have captured low, ambiguous EVPs in the wards, soothing tones that some interpret as singing. Security systems in closed wings have recorded brief camera glitches, and several staff members over the years report that their wristwatches slow or stop inexplicably after late shifts in specific rooms. Local reaction warning. The annex is not open to tourism. Caretakers warn that the building is fragile and that many rooms are unsecured for safety reasons. They implore the curious not to enter without permission. The stories from inside medical wards demand sensitivity. The next place is an even heavier memory, and its history is darker still. Many of these sites are private or fragile. Do not trespass. If you visit, follow local rules and prioritize safety. 8. Abandoned mill on the ridge, rural county road. History anchor. Once the economic heart of a small village, the mill ground grain and drew farmers to town. After mechanization and migration, it fell into disuse and its bones remain weathered and hollow. Encounter vignette. An evening photographer, drawn to rusted gears and moonlit rafters, sets up a long exposure and walks the perimeter. Halfway through the shot, he feels a presence just behind him, like someone settling onto the adjacent stone wall. A breath, almost a whisper, brushes his ear. He spins, flash in hand, and darkness answers. Checking the back of his camera later, he finds a single frame with a faint double exposure, an indistinct profile as if seen through fog. Evidence note. Local photographers over time have found unexplained anomalies in long exposures, soft blurs and asymmetric light streaks, yet the mill shows no clear footprint in surveillance. Occasional thermal sweeps reveal cooler pockets near the foundation at times when the air is otherwise still. Local reaction/warning. Farmers avoid the old lot in winter when the ground is slick. Locals stress the danger of entering decayed structures and advise visitors to admire from the access road. The next encounter is close by, a farmhouse that seemed ordinary until the first storm. 9. The Old Farmer's House, edge of a forgotten town. History anchor. A modest farmhouse that weathered storms, births, funerals, and the slow decline that afflicts many rural homesteads. Its family rooms hold generations of memory. Encounter vignette. During the severe thunderstorm, a local family huddles in the kitchen while lightning cracks the horizon. The youngest child tugs at her mother's sleeve and whispers, "There's a lady in the hall." No one else sees her, but porch boards creak in synchronized steps, steps that circle the house twice before falling silent. In the morning, an old brass button appears atop the mantel where no one left it. Evidence note. Neighbors report that the house's alarm system has been triggered by movement when the family insists no one crossed the threshold. A neighbor's security camera once captured a quick vertical smear by the doorway. No recognizable features, just motion. Local reaction/warning. The family treats the occurrences as part of daily life. Outsiders are asked not to film or enter on private property. As we trace these stories into denser woods, the terrain tightens and voices grow quieter. 10. Small town opera house, Main Street, otherwise sleepy downtown. History anchor. Once a cultural hub where traveling troupes performed, the old theater fell into periods of disrepair and revival. Its balcony and stage have seen applause and near silence. Encounter vignette. A stagehand preparing the lighting board alone after a rehearsal hears the distinct sound of a single hand clapping from the empty balcony. A measured, polite applause. When he looks up, the seats are empty, but a single curtain pearl, the kind you pull to adjust lights, has been drawn halfway. A week later, a visiting actor swears he felt fingers lift the back of his costume as he bowed to an unseen spectator. Evidence note. Acoustic tests in the hall reveal odd echoes that seem to return with a slightly different timbre than modern sound engineering predicts. Motion sensors have registered brief, isolated activations near the stage at times when lights and sound systems are offline. Local reaction/warning. The theater board welcomes respectful tours and live shows, but discourages solo late-night visits. Performers sometimes leave flowers on the stage in memory of earlier players. The next site takes us to stones and names. 11. Central State Hospital, Martinsville area. History anchor. Once a sprawling state psychiatric campus that housed thousands across decades, Central State's closed wards and abandoned wings carry the weight of changing treatments, overcrowding, and generations of patients who passed within its stone and brick walls. Its history is complicated and painful. It has been the subject of stories about neglect as well as care, and the building itself preserves those layered memories. Encounter vignette. Investigators who have moved quietly through the corridor describe the air thickening as if someone has closed a door to the world. A volunteer sits at a small metal table in an administration room and hears, plain and near, a childlike voice repeating a single name, soft, pleading, though no child is present. Down the hall, a lead investigator pauses at an unlocked ward and sees the silhouette of a figure standing in a doorway. Its posture is hunched, hands clasped as if holding something precious. When he steps closer, a chorus of low murmurs rises, part prayer, part pleading, and the smell of antiseptic and something sweeter, like old linens, fills the room. A nurse working nights once described the sensation of being watched while charting. Pens move in her hand, though no one touches them, and a closet door that had been latched opens slowly, as if on its own accord. Evidence note. Several investigators report capturing EVPs that include fragments of recognizable phrases, snatches of names, or the single repeated syllable that witnesses later identify as the same sound recorded at different times. Thermal imaging during walkthroughs shows pockets of persistent cold in certain day rooms where the air reads several degrees lower than adjacent corridors. Older security footage, recovered from archives after the building was mostly shuttered, contains anomalies, a shadow that detaches from a hallway wall and lingers near a window, or a slow-moving dark smear that seems to pass through closed doors. Batteries drained quickly during prolonged surveys in the lower levels, and equipment sometimes reset inexplicably when teams entered particular rooms. Investigators are careful to note environmental causes and empty histories. The recordings are presented as part of a pattern of witness reports, not as definitive proof. Local reaction warning. For locals, Central State is not a curiosity, but a reminder of difficult histories. Neighborhood groups and former staff urge visitors to treat the site with solemnity. Many who worked there remember patients as people, not specters, and oppose any attempt to turn private grief into spectacle. Officials stress that the building is structurally unsound in places, and that exploring closed wards is dangerous and unlawful. Those who feel compelled to learn its story are directed to records, reunions, and memorial projects rather than to trespass in the dark. This is one of the heaviest places in the state. Leave the building to the work of record-keeping and remembrance, and step outside where the air clears, because the next place we visit is quieter in sound but sharp in sight. 12. James Whitcomb Riley House, Greenfield. History anchor. The preserved home of a celebrated poet set in a quiet Indiana town. The house endures as a space of memory. Books left on tables, typed pages stored in trunks, and a life that touched readers across an era. It is a place where words seem to linger like the dust motes in the beams. Encounter vignette. A docent closing the parlor late in the afternoon stops as a soft, rhythmic tapping begins at the old typewriter on the desk. 3 deliberate keystrokes, then a pause, then 3 more. The woman stands very still. The tapping resumes, this time from the foot of the staircase, quick and precise like someone composing a line in a hurry. She climbs the stairs and finds the nursery window open to the breeze, though she distinctly remembers locking it. Upstairs, a faded scarf rests folded on a rocking chair where it had not been before. A visitor who spent a twilight hour reading in the back room reports a sudden delicate scent of pipe tobacco and lilacs, though there are no smoking materials and the flower beds outside no longer bloom in that season. Evidence note. Volunteers and archivists have occasionally found photographs that show a faint, translucent figure near the window in the background, an extra presence not recognized by any person in the room. Portable audio recorders sometimes capture the lingering cadence of a verse, too faint to transcribe but distinct enough for listeners to say later, "That sounds like a line of poetry." Curators warn that humidity and old wooden floors produce their own creaks and scents. They encourage careful listening and contextual consideration, while still acknowledging repeated, consistent reports across different visitors. Local reaction warning. The Riley House is maintained as a museum and a site of literary pilgrimage. Staff welcome respectful visitors during open hours and ask that guests refrain from staging seances or attempting to deliberately provoke any presence. The house's caretakers emphasize preservation. Do not touch the artifacts and follow tour guidelines. If the house feels alive, it is more of a memory pressing gently against the present. Yet even gentle memories deserve a measured respect. As we step back onto the road, the trees seem to hush. These 12 sites close a loop. From stages and hotels to hospitals and hearths, each place remembers differently. Synthesis. Patterns across 12 encounters. What links these dozen places is not a single dramatic proof, but a pattern of human testimony layered upon place. Across inns, libraries, theaters, hospitals, mills, and private homes, witnesses describe a handful of recurring phenomena. Temperature anomalies that set the skin on edge, sounds that have no visible source, whispers, footsteps, a single thin clap, brief visions or shapes resolved from reflected light, and a particular way objects sometimes rearrange as if nudged by an absent hand. Investigators charted EVPs that return as fragments, security footage with anomalies at the edge of frames, cameras that lost power at critical moments, and personal accounts of being gently touched, guided, or watched. History ties to haunting in two distinct ways. In some locations, tragic or intense past events, fires, institutional treatment, long nights of care, provide a clear anchor for why witnesses feel a presence there. In others, the sense of lingering comes from simpler continuity. Houses that saw births and deaths, theaters where applause once roared, inns that hosted travelers who left and never returned. In either case, the pattern is not a claim of proof, but a map of memory. Places hold stories, and people walking into those rooms sometimes find the past pressing back. Credibility comes from repetition and restraint. Many witnesses are employees or locals who returned multiple times. Their reports overlap in sensory detail, even as they vary in how they interpret what was felt. Investigators make careful notes of environmental variables and do not rush to supernatural conclusions. Where recordings are made, they often remain ambiguous. Fragments, anomalies, and images that invite interpretation rather than settle questions. That uncertainty is part of the pull. These accounts resist tidy explanations and reward sustained listening. Ethics and caution in haunted places. These stories are not entertainment detached from consequence. Several of the sites touched on histories of pain, institutions where patients endured rough conditions, homes linked to the Underground Railroad and the suffering it tried to relieve, buildings scarred by fires and loss. In every instance where those realities are present, witnesses and caretakers ask for respect. Do not reduce suffering to a spectacle. If a place is now a museum or a memorial, seek out the formal ways to learn: documentary collections, memorial services, archived testimonies that honor the people whose lives are part of that history. Practical warnings are not mere prudence, they are a moral imperative. Many of the properties described here are private, fragile, or structurally unsafe. Do not trespass. Where a site is open for tours or public programming, follow the posted rules and the guidance of caretakers. If you are drawn to the thrill of a story, channel that energy into documented research, sanctioned visits, and conversations with local historians rather than into after-hours exploration. The curiosity that brought these accounts into being should be partnered with responsibility. A final reflection. Indiana's remotest corners, it turns out, are not blank or empty. They are stitched with human time in ways that show up when the lights dim and the air cools. Memory accumulates in rooms and halls, in the grain of floorboards and the soot left by long-extinguished fires. Witnesses do not always agree on what they experienced or how to name it. Some call it haunting, others call it memory, most call it something they cannot fully explain. That irresolution is part of what makes listening valuable. It acknowledges that we share spaces with histories that continue to affect us. If a story here unsettles you, let it change how you move through places. Treat buildings and landscapes as records to be read carefully. Ask permission before you enter. Respect caretakers, memorials, and the quiet dignity of those who lived and worked in these spaces. The people who told their accounts refused to make light of others' suffering, and we owe them the same restraint in how we tell and retell these encounters. If you were moved by these 12 accounts, leave one comment below telling us which encounter unsettled you most, or share your own experience if you have one to tell. Subscribe to hear more careful investigations of haunted places and bring someone who will treat the stories with the respect they deserve. Thank you for listening as we walked quietly through these remote parts of Indiana, where history lingers in the dark and witnesses keep watch.